I'm an open source maintainer. So I run an open source project, and I'm also a team lead. So I'm kind of coming at this idea of reviewing code, writing code and reading code from both a commercial and an open source kind of angle.
So basically, from this point, things can only improve, is what I'm saying. All right. Oh, you're lovely. This is good. Yeah, so hopefully you can hear me this time. I'm an open source maintainer. I'm also a technical team lead. So I'm coming at the idea of reviewing code and preparing code to be reviewed from a couple of different directions. This talk covers both reviewing code, so being a code reviewer, and having your code reviewed. And I really believe that all developers should be on both sides of that relationship. In my own teams, I require that when somebody writes a feature or a bug fix, some other person reviews it, and it can be anybody. My theory is that you don't get to be a great novelist without reading a lot of words. And that is true for development as well. To write good code, you need to read a lot of code. You need to see a lot of code, and you need to study your craft. So you should be reading code and reviewing code as well as writing it. During this talk, I will offer up a series of totally unsolicited advice, which you may find helpful. If you don't find it helpful, ignore it. I have some stories to tell. Sadly, it's videoed, so I'll try to be polite about the colleagues that I'm telling stories about. I think my main advice with code reviews boils down to 3 main ingredients. This is the recipe for surviving a code review. First, the code. Prepare your code, make sure it's the right code, all of the right code, and nothing more. Write me some words. I do not want a pull request which is just diff and no words. Please explain to me why I care. Please write me a title which has more than just the bug number. Your pull request will have to sit in my pull request queue for quite a long time before I get to know each ticket by its number, because it's been in the queue so long. Right? Some words as well would be super helpful. Remember the perspective of the reviewer. If I normally reject your pull requests because you haven't validated your data, or because I usually have some security concerns, if you're offering me a patch for my open source project, explain to me why I care. If I accept your code into my open source project, I'm signing up to support this forever. So you might think this feature's amazing, but understand my point of view. I need to understand why it's important. Why should I care? Why should I take on this additional burden? I may not want scope creep in something that I need to support. So the code, the words, and the perspective, 3 really important things. And I think as developers we can sometimes focus too much on the code, and that is not a way to get your patch accepted or to get your pull request, even at work, accepted. When I'm evaluating a pull request for the first time, my first question is, what does it do? Does it fix a feature? Does it implement a feature? Does it fix a bug? Is it related to a ticket that we already had in our ticket tracking system? At work, I require this. For open source, I don't. If you're hacking on my project and you see something you can improve, I'm not going to make you do paperwork. You can just open a pull request. The best pull requests are associated with a ticket and are associated with only one ticket. So if you think of a pull request acceptance being like a game, then for having your pull request associated with a ticket, you get 10 points. For every additional ticket that is included in the same pull request, you get -3 points. Okay? So it's okay to fix a couple of things at once, but by the time you get to 3 or 4, you're in negative points, and then you fail the game. Okay, I win, you lose. So 1 ticket, awesome. Couple of tickets, okay, but the more tickets, the worse news that it is. The reason I like pull requests that are linked to an existing item in your issue tracker is because usually that will have a good description of the feature we need or the bug that was seen. So somebody will have reported this. Somebody may have had to come and add some more information, but fundamentally there will be some acceptance criteria, something which describes what should be happening and perhaps what isn't happening now. This enables you to properly test your patch and allows me to properly understand what is needed from this change. So, if there are no acceptance criteria, you need to invent some. And sometimes it's worth making a ticket just to make it clear what it is, to have the opportunity to describe your feature before you open the pull request. When you have built your feature or bug fix and opening your pull request, make sure that you have the right code in the pull request. GitHub makes this super easy. Most of my examples today will mention GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, they all do the same thing. There's nothing I'm going to say today which is specifically about GitHub except maybe some commit status API stuff. Make sure that all the code that is needed is here. Okay? Just check you haven't added any new files and forgotten to include them. And try to check that you haven't included anything I don't need, such as your swap files, or your .project file, or your .idea file, all those sorts of things. I don't want them. Read the diff before you press the go button, and this will give you a good idea of what's happening. When I'm evaluating a pull request, as well as when I'm preparing a pull request, these are basically the same process, right? One you do as a submitter immediately before you open the pull request, and one you do as a reviewer immediately at the beginning of looking at the pull request. And you can think about how the reviewer will look at your pull request, and you can do that before you start. Make sure the right code is in here. If you're on a branch and you diff against master, sometimes you see too much content because you'll see the opposite of everything that's happened in master as well as what is on your branch. So you see backwards commits of unrelated features that are on master. This is too much information. Try this. While you're checked out on your branch, git diff master ..head shows you all the commits on this branch since the last common commit with master. So just the content of a branch. I use this a lot as a reviewer, but it's equally valuable when you're preparing a branch you're going to submit as a pull request. Get to know your diff tools, get to know what normal looks like, get to know how things should look when you're working with small patches that you understand. Because if you need to do a massive refactoring one, the familiarity with those tools will be golden for being able to then step up and deal with a much more complex patch if you need to. So get to know your tools. Git has diff, obviously, which shows you that kind of ASCII line at a time patch type style, but it also has a config setting for diff.tool. So if you're using a nicer view, if you're using one of the GitHub desktop tools or source tree, or I have Meld installed on my machine, then you can configure what your diff tool is and get a much prettier side-by-side view, which can be really helpful for reviewing, and whether that's you're reviewing before you submit or you're reviewing somebody else's submission. One thing which is very difficult to achieve is properly reviewing a pull request when it is too big. One day I would like to close a pull request with just this comment. It is too big. If you send me a massive refactoring, there's no way I can properly evaluate that. And if I'm not confident in a test coverage because it's an older system or whatever, this is very, very difficult to sign up and accept. And you may have done a lot of work on it. I had a situation where somebody opened a pull request bringing our existing project, open source project, into line with a completely different coding standard than the one it currently uses. I was at a conference. My co-maintainer was at the same conference with me. We were both on the road. And this incoming pull request had 37,000 lines of change. I had something like 8 or 10 open pull requests. Every single one would have had to have been not just rebased, but probably rewritten. We closed it. Was it a bad pull request? Did the guy do the wrong thing? No, it was actually probably a positive thing for the project, but unexpectedly, when we had no time to review and merge and we didn't know it was coming, impossible. And the best thing you can do is admit that you will never accept this and close it quickly. That's the best thing that you can do. There are some mistakes that I see all the time, and I think as developers, until you've really been a reviewer, can be hard to understand why these are a problem. Exotic code, especially if it hasn't got comments, like complicated regexes, please comment me a pattern it will match and a pattern it won't match. Give me a clue. If I have to look up the operator precedence for whichever language this is to understand what your code does, I probably don't want that in my code base. Make it easy, add some brackets, we're not doing code golf. Not many of us write languages where the size of the program on disk really matters. So just take an extra couple of lines and write me some comments. Make it clear what this does. I really hate seeing commented out code in a project. We're using source control. Like, if we ever need this code again, I can get it back. That's the point. There is no need to leave commented out code in a code review. I rejected a pull request because there was code that didn't fit. And on closer inspection, in reading the diff, I hadn't seen all of the comment markers. We somehow changed a block of code that was like in the middle of a big commented out block. If I can't understand the diff, we're doing something wrong. Okay, so leaving commented out code in your code, in my code base, I guess, because as a tech lead, I'm responsible for this, is like leaving rubbish lying around on a campsite. Don't do it. There are a few use cases where I don't mind. For example, if it's very difficult to get the right debug line for a specific thing that might go wrong fairly often, you can leave that one line in with a comment. But otherwise, don't do this. GitHub, Bitbucket, a couple of other projects that typically do more open source will have this contributing.md file. So this will describe how contributors should interact with this project. They show it to you when you try and open a pull request, which is much, much too late. So look out for these files if you are contributing to open source, you're using a library and you want to just fix something upstream. Check for the existence of a contributing.md file. Some of them will say things like, you need to talk to the maintainers first. Some of them will say, your branch has to be named in a certain way. Others will say, pull requests are only accepted if you squash and rebase and then open a pull request. So it's worth checking what is required of you before you start, just so you don't waste your effort. Few things impress me more than a pull request that I cannot break. I think my colleagues believe I have a special magical power where their code works really well until it is too close to me, and then I have some special field that makes their code bend and stop working. And the reality is, you need to test your code before you give it to me. Usually people who are maintainers or reviewing your code, what we want is to have a really smooth progression. The hard part should be in the development stage, and once you are happy, it should go into review. Yes, we might need to discuss, and that isn't automatically a bad thing, but work that is in progress costs us mental energy, if nothing else, in our projects. So when that feature is theoretically development complete. We want it to go quite smoothly as best we can out onto the live platforms. So preparing yourself to get through the code review gate is great. So try and break your code. Seriously, because I can, whether you can or not. I do things like passing incomplete data. If you've got a form in your patch, I'll just submit it empty and see what happens. Testing with users of different levels. I mostly do web projects, and I see way too many which are just the developers logged in as the admin user, and then that was all they tested. And so you suddenly log in as a different user, or they weren't logged in as the admin user, and you try logging in as the admin user, you can suddenly break stuff. It's not that I have a superpower at all, it's that users are idiots, and I have more experience than I hope I look like I do at dealing with having my code broken by idiots. So I now do a very convincing impression of an idiot. And this is how I test your patch when you offer me a pull request. So try and do that beforehand, especially if you... So I'm part-time at work. I'm the most senior person in my team, and I am part-time. So whenever I do go back to work after a couple of days doing something else, there is always a big heap of pull requests. And some days, less than half of those get merged because I just break them. And people kind of waited a week for my time. And if they had just tested them first and made them a bit more ready, we could have got through. So do your preparation, and that will avoid you being embarrassed and your code being rejected. If there is support for tests in your project, I hope there is, but you know, I'm a PHP developer, so not always. If there is support for tests, write them. Whether or not it's required with your patch, write them. Because this will really help you to understand what you're trying to do, and crucially, what the failure cases look like. We can all do, when things are going well, the user will click this button, and the expected outcome will occur. Good. What about when that's not the case? Try to write tests for the failure cases. Think about what could go wrong. Can you test what happens when the API isn't there? Can you mock a DNS error? Like, write me some tests. Tests are amazing because you write this thing and you submit it with your code, and then every single time any other person ever makes a change, it's like you came to check on your feature and make sure everything was still okay. Like, we get the benefit of that investment every single time we run the build. It blows me away. I shouldn't be surprised. I've been doing this a long time, but the investment of that and the value of that, and when one of those tests fails, oh, hey, we haven't touched that in a while, but look, we managed to break it by doing this. Amazing. Coding standards. If there are coding standards, it should say so, and there should be an automated way of checking stuff. Different languages have different ways of doing it. Some languages all use the same standard, and there are no questions asked. Some languages may use different standards depending on the project, depending on which framework you're using, and so on. So find out what's expected. Normally there'll be an automated job for this. And I also have syntax check running. So my junior developers were really offended when I added a syntax check into the build process. It's not that I don't think they can write valid PHP, but it's really good at catching things like Git conflict markers, and just copy-paste errors, other random things that just should never happen, but if they do, the computer can catch them. So let's use that. So I use syntax check as well. I normally have all of those last three, the tests, the coding standards, and the syntax check, all building automatically when someone opens a pull request. GitHub has the commit status API, so you can just have it kick off a build when someone opens a pull request. What's really nice about that is it does the low-hanging fruit, like a coding standards check. Okay, for the record, I'm a horrible open source project maintainer because I'm super busy. So you can wait. Weeks is not an exaggeration sometimes to get your pull request reviewed on my project. And if I'm going to reject it because you failed the coding standards check, like, we could probably have done that beforehand. So the computer does that, and you'll get some instant feedback. For the record, nearly all of my own pull requests fail on that as well. I'm allergic to the new PHP coding. Like, I'm case sensitive, but apparently I'm not PSR2 sensitive yet. And normally I run the tools, but then, you know, sometimes you run the tools, you think, oh yeah, I could just add one more test, and actually this error case could be better, and you edit, and then, yeah, there's a missing white space character somewhere, and the coding standards check fails. On a more human level, getting the syntax check feedback and coding standards feedback from a computer, I don't know, it's just easier to take the bad news, I guess. That's very factual from a machine. It just comes back and says, I'm sorry, you are missing a white space. So I quite like that. I quite like that it's automated. And at least it gives rapid feedback on the things that are easy to check. Commit messages. Oh, yes, it matters. Yes, it matters. Don't care how good your patch is. The commits that you send me, the adventure that you had on your branch while you were trying to work out how to solve this problem. And sometimes it's not obvious, right? When you start solving a problem, the destination is not always clear. We can sometimes have quite the journey along the way, but your commit history will be part of my project until the end of time. And yes, I do read the commit history. I do look things up. I do need to refer to it. Sometimes I have to do what I call archaeology to understand how this project ended up looking just like it does right now. So please, with your pull requests, decent commit history. And if you get to the end of a branch and your commit history is nonsense because you are just learning Git, or it was much harder than you thought, or there was a problem with your tool along the way, then just take your changes. This command will just stage them as being a local change, not committed yet. And now you can go through and add the sections of the files that you want and give me a new and clean commit history. These slides are online. Don't feel you have to write this down. Other things I need in commit messages. Please give me more information than I get from the diff. I was at work and a commit message came past, and I am not exaggerating. It exactly said, shuffling around the JavaScript files. So this made me instantly, so we have a bot that talks to us in our Slack channel, instantly made me go, do you call that a commit message? And read the diff. From the diff, yeah, it shuffled around the JavaScript files. I never really found out why, actually. So we need to know why. I'm famous for writing commit messages which are longer than the diff. Sometimes the smallest changes are the most subtle, and they need the most explanation. You know, if you're making a big change, which obviously adds a view and adds some controller behind that, and fine, we can see what's going on. Single switch to a command that happens during deployment. Probably need to write you a message about what problem this is I'm solving and why we made this unusual single switch change to a deployment command, right? It matters. Please make it accurate as well. I see a lot of particularly pull request comments which can just describe the last thing that happened and not the whole of the rest of the branch. So try to be accurate and descriptive about what is happening here. I think the thing I said about I need the code and the words is really important. One morning I woke up to find my co-maintainer, who should know better, had opened a pull request and it said implements the get cache function. I'm thinking, interesting. Thought we had a get cache function, all right. So I had a look at the diff. It implemented the get cache function. Didn't call it from anywhere. Just built this function. Interesting. Okay. When I eventually did talk to him later in the day, it turns out we broke the search feature on every platform because the get cache function is missing. I knew search was broken, and he fixed it late at night and opened me a pull request, which fixed the search function. That's not what the pull request said. So I didn't merge it. Right? We somehow managed to eliminate, we had like a bad merge or something, and somehow we lost this function, which needed reinstating. But it doesn't say, hey, this pull request, you will observe the search function works after you apply it. No, it just said, hey, here's a get cache feature. And yeah, there was a function called get cache. Good. And that's why the words are so important. That's for your pull requests and for your commit messages as well. Super, super important. I really enjoy pull requests, commit messages, which are in a sane format. Please, please aim for a sane format. We can save a 20-minute rant here if you will just read this link. I'm going to summarize horribly and say a short headline message starts with a capital letter and kind of commands, do this, fix the search function, add the validation for the map, right? Short message. I think it's like the recommendation max is 50 characters. I have a Vim plugin which changes color when I write too much. Then if you need to write more, you need to write more than 50 characters. So if you need to write more, blank line, then write as much as you like. Give me bullet points, give me hyperlinks, give me examples. This article is very, very good. You're going to read it. I'm going to tweet it later. You're going to read it. You're going to ask your team to read it. It's written by a guy who follows, if any of you know, like Tim Pope and all the kind of Vim bundler pathogen type things, they all use this type of pattern, and it does make your history really easy to read. Very, 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 very important. So don't git commit -m, don't copy and paste, don't write fixed, don't copy and paste the message from somewhere else that your editor is offering you. Get into the text editor view, write me a short headline, then write me some more words. And set up all your tools to only show the top headline so that you're not cluttering up channel with lots and lots of words. That's working well for me. What else do I want to say about commit messages? Please, please, commit messages, safe for work. I don't care who you think your audience is. If you're putting out an open source library, I might want to use it. And I might want to use it in a commercial setting. And even if I was using it in a hobby setting, I don't need your sexist, racist language. I don't really need your swearing either. So just be polite, please. I don't really like to see apologies. I will normally close your pull request if it comes with apologies. Like either it is good enough or you need to apologize. Like, if you're apologizing, I probably don't want that in my code base. And there are some exceptions here. My open source project joined in, gets a lot of very new contributors. So there can be a lot of, I'm sorry, I don't know any PHP, I don't know any Git, whatever. We will try and see past that. I might rewrite your commit history if it's full of apologies. But generally, if you had to apologize, then don't. Go away and make your code good enough that you don't need to apologize. And then I want it in my project. Okay, so look out for apologies. Check if it will merge. Because if it won't, the magic green button on... don't press the green button on GitHub. The magic green button on GitHub won't be there. There'll be no magic green button. And then your pull request, probably somebody will ask you to rebase. So you can check that in advance if you want to. Just do the merge, so flip to the master branch, try and merge, and if you do this --no commit, it will show you if there are conflicts or not, and then you can just back out the merge by aborting. So this lets you very easily check if it's going to merge into master. This can also show you what the conflicts will be, and that can sometimes be helpful as well. If there's a problem with the merging, then fix it. You might need to rebase your branch. Some projects will also allow you to merge your master branch into the feature to kind of pick up the changes and resolve the conflicts there, and that makes your master mergeable. Most projects will ask you to rebase. Everybody who runs a project, commercial or open source that was going to ask you to rebase will be delighted to help you rebase correctly. I teach Git, and the reason I teach Git is because I'm an open source maintainer. So I kind of teach Git in IRC as a hobby, and I eventually scaled it up and started doing it as official workshops because I was doing so much of it. Everybody will be happy to help you, so just ask if you're not familiar with this. One thing I think people sometimes miss about pull requests is you don't finish the feature and then send it to the pull request and that's the end of your involvement. The pull request is just the start of getting your feature accepted. You need to be prepared to keep responding to the discussion, to questions. You may need to add more patches. It's the beginning of the conversation, and you may need to champion your feature all the way to the end. So at work, your colleagues may have questions or concerns. We may agree on doing some refactoring. There might be some more work to do. That's okay. The pull request is about starting the conversation and offering that patch up. But then you need to kind of look after it and shepherd it all the way through to being accepted. Check that you have the source and target correctly. I typically do this wrong on repositories that have a GitHub Pages branch, and I'm trying to merge a documentation fix in. GitHub and all of the other equivalent hosting platforms will have a setting on each repository for what the default branch is. So if you're a Git flow person and you always want to be opening a pull request against develop, you can get it to default to that. So it's worth setting up your repo settings correctly. It can help you to get this right. Check the diff. It's very easy to type the sort of subject and description at the top of the pull request page. Scroll down, scroll down, scroll down, keep scrolling. This is your diff. You should be able to tell very quickly if you have opened the diff against the correct place or not. And if not, something is terribly wrong. And you should, regroup and try again. The title is important. Usually the title will appear in the list of pull requests, and it's the only information that will go through the notifications by email, by Slack channel, whatever. So meaningful titles. I think I said this already about the bug number. Give me a clue, because the one with the bug number is not the one that I'm going to pick when I've got 20 minutes to my next call and I'm having a quick look at my open source pull requests or seeing what the team have saved up for me. If it's called bug 42, probably not. Fixed date picker validation, probably got time to look at that one. So this way, your pull request will just get ignored if there's not good motivational information in here. The description is important. There's lots of things I need to know here. Tell me what it does. Tell me how to tell if it's working or not. We have a client that is ISO 27001 compliant, and what that means is for every change we ship, every single thing that changes has to have documentation in it which describes how to observe that this change has not yet been made, and then how to observe that this change has been made. And we have to supply those at the time that we open the pull request. This is brilliant, actually, because it means I get a lot more information on that project, about the change, about how to test the change, about how to test the failure cases for the change. And I get all of that in the description. So that can be really helpful. Beware of writing very specific testing instructions. We had a bug with like a rounding error on a percentage discount on a multi-currency system, and my colleague fixed it, and he sent me the pull request, but the pull request had type in this number, and then this number should come out. And it's like, well, you've obviously tested those numbers. What I actually need to do is think of some new numbers and understand the feature and work out what the correct output would be. So it's good to say, hey, you need to look at this page and check that, but it needs to be a high-level description. Telling me what to type, like presumably our automated tests are typing this. I don't need to type this. I need to check that it rounds up and down correctly, for example. Tell me why I care. At work, I'm probably paid to care, although I sometimes get patches for internal dev tools that just make me go, yeah, I'm probably too busy for that today. It doesn't sound very exciting. One of my colleagues has wised up to this and has started editing the merge requests when he wants me to do something. So not so much that he writes messages to me, although that has happened as well, but just like, this is really important. You actually do need this feature because of this thing where we switch branches and the database patching is horribly out of date. This fixes that thing we have. The thing where the cache clearing isn't working. This fixes that thing. Okay, yeah, now I know why I care and I will get it merged. This is something that I want to say about the process of code review, and it's about language. Please don't ask me to merge your pull request. Please ask me to review it. I need to approach these things with a certain amount of skepticism. Sometimes this happens. Somebody fixes a bug, and I want to merge it. I don't want to review it. I want to merge it. It's great, and all I have to do is click the button. No, I never click the green button. I don't have a good relationship. And that gets me into trouble. I almost always merge it into master too soon and then realize the tests are failing or something else terrible is wrong or we haven't thought this through, because I approached the pull request with the intention of merging. Occasionally I come to work after a few days working somewhere else because I'm part-time, and it'll be, yeah, we'll ship this tomorrow, we're just waiting for Lorna to come and merge it. Oh dear. Especially when you get there and you can't merge that. So, yeah. Client's expecting it to ship this morning, and developer colleague has not really closed the loop. Didn't test it before they opened the pull request, didn't do as much work as they could have, hasn't thought of all of the, I'm senior, that's my job, but yeah. But has somehow promised that it'll be merged in the morning. That's really tough. That's a difficult one. Try to approach it with the attitude that you want to review it, and you'll either merge it or you will offer some constructive feedback. I think it's really important that all of us are reviewing code. We should all be reading code, we should all be writing code. For an open source project, I am the gatekeeper. Other people don't have write access. But at work, I insist on peer review. The seniors don't do the reviewing. Everybody reviews. So somebody writes it, somebody reviews it, and I don't care who does what. If it's a really crucial piece, perhaps I'll say, hey, I would like to review that, but I never insist that it's seen by a senior. What that means is that we cross-pollinate our coding styles and practices across the whole team, because everybody is reading everybody else's code all the time. And I love this as a pattern. It exposes the most junior person in the team to my approach. The most junior people ask the best questions, so I feel like I learn a lot then, and everybody is seeing everybody else's code. As a reviewer, there are some key skills. Being able to see what is not there is a superpower. Realizing that we forgot to update the reporting system when we renamed a column and we fixed the rest of the web interface. This is a really hard skill to learn, and you'll only learn if you practice reading code. You might not have the right to merge it, but I think you should be reading it anyway. Also, as an open source reviewer, if I see a pull request with a +1 on it, I'm way more likely to review that and try and get it into the project. So that's a good way of getting features that you support moved forward. Get it on your dev platform and say, yeah, works for me. Brilliant. Documentation, some projects require it. It's good practice anyway. At work I require it. I will just not merge until you have finished writing up what needs to go with it. Said my piece about tests. Look out for database patches. They are often missed. Depending, again, on your tooling and the standard practice around this, be really careful. Things that make your patch deployable. Have you considered the cron jobs? I've just madly refactored a load of Gearman jobs. I knew it was going to break the monitoring, so we were able to put through change requests for the sysadmins to say, hey, none of the right Gearman jobs will be running when we do this deployment. Here's how the new set should look. So we realized we didn't just break it all. I'm running out of time. Things that are often forgotten: template changes, email changes, report changes, monitoring changes, cron job changes. And if you see something that is wrong, don't be afraid to say so. You're reviewing it because that's your job. You know, you're not going to get in trouble for doing the right thing by your code base. I hate to point this out, but you are not at work to be popular. You're at work to be good at what you do. You're at work to be responsible with what needs to happen and for shipping good stuff. And sometimes that means rejecting a change. If you have an automated build, that can be a good first pass. Please be constructive in your feedback. It is not personal, and make sure that your feedback is not personal. And try not to take it personally. That's hard because we invest so much of ourselves in the changes that we make. I give different feedback to colleagues versus open source contributors. For an open source patch, I am more likely to make a minor change myself and then merge it. For a colleague, I work with these people. I don't want to be tidying up after them all the time, so they will typically get feedback of things I don't want to have to fix every time. So that's just a different thing. There is such a thing as too much feedback. Please don't, nitpick. Don't mention many small things which aren't important. If you would accept this patch, then accept it. If not, say why. You can offer some, next time it might be nicer to do this, but don't list loads of things that are slightly wrong, because it's really demoralizing for the person who's reading that feedback. The sandwich technique is a feedback technique, and it will allow you to offer something you like, something which could be improved, and then some general words of encouragement. So again, try to be positive and then ask for the change that you want. In open source particularly, we are not very good at saying thank you. So try to include that as well. Sometimes you will encounter harsh feedback. Someone is wrong on the internet. Really. Harsh feedback, just move on. It's way more likely that if you contribute to open source, you will get no feedback, right? There's a lot of dead pull requests on the internet. Harsh feedback, I believe everybody has their place in open source. So if you're getting this isn't your place. Go find somewhere else where you will be appreciated. It is okay to keep moving in open source contribution terms. If this happens at work, then you need to keep moving. The same advice applies. This is not acceptable in the workplace. It shouldn't be harsh. It must be constructive. It should never be personal. And you can offer some feedback on the feedback, but if nothing changes, don't stay. Pull requests have a life cycle. I've said that. So, 3 main ingredients: the code, the words. Try and remember the point of view of the person who has to review this. A massive change, something that doesn't come with an explanation, something which doesn't come with tests or documentation, something which implements the dancing bear feature that I never knew I needed. Those are hard for reviewers to invest in and understand, and you're much less likely to get a successful outcome to your code review. I think I don't have time for questions, do I? I think I talked too much. Okay, so you need to come and find me wandering around if you have questions. I just wanted to say you've been lovely. Thanks a lot for coming.